everyone, it's Suzanne. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to share with you all the books I read in May. And wow, it is hot. My daughter gave me this fan to cool me off because we don't have the air conditioner in this room yet, but my goodness. Anyway, we're going to get through this because this is the only time I have to film this video. I'm going to start off with the adult books I read, moving to YA, and then on to middle grade. So apparently I've read one adult book and the rest are YA middle grade. The first adult book is a fictional book and it's called All the Children Are Home, and this is by Patry Francis, and this is about two families that foster children. And I can't remember exactly, but I think the only reason I would have picked up this book is by recommendation, so I'm quite sure this was by Chantal at An Intentional Life. I will leave her channel down below. I'm just going to say this right off so you know, for those that are going to watch my wrap-ups and vlogs, I have a terrible memory for names. I can read an entire book and not remember the main character's name. I don't know why that is. I remember the story just fine. I'm saying that because I can't remember the characters' names in this. It was a month ago. I really can't remember. So this is about a couple that foster kids, and they have 3 kids that they've had for their children's, majority of the children's life. 2 are teenagers and one's about 10. And into their home comes a young girl about 5 or 6 years old. And she's a native girl, and she comes from really horrific background in terms of abuse. And it's watching her sort of bring the house alive, and we get to learn why the woman that has why the woman who has fostered these children never leaves her house. There's a mystery there. Something happened to her right before she was about to go to college, and we're not sure what that is, but it definitely has left her with some enemies in the town, and she married somebody who wasn't necessarily her first choice, but helped to keep her safe. And like I said, she hasn't left her house. This is a very emotional book. I read it very quickly, and I gave it about a 4.5. I thought it was really well written. The mystery was there throughout the book. You really get tied up with the children. And of course, it wasn't emotionally raw. You couldn't read this and not cry. But I really enjoyed the story, and I really enjoyed the interpersonal connections between all of the children and with their parents. And I would recommend it if you like those kind of stories. The ending was okay. I think it was fitting for the mystery that was throughout the book. I kind of wanted more, but overall it was a really good read. The next books I'm going to talk about is a duology. I read the King of Scars duology, and this is by Leigh Bardugo. This is a YA fantasy, and the first one is King of Scars, and then we have the last one is Rule of Wolves. This duology is from the Grishaverse. The Grishaverse begins with Shadow and Bones trilogy. Then it moves into the Six of Crows duology. And this is the final duology. And Leigh Bardugo has said these are the final books in the Grishaverse. And in this book, King of Scars, and I'm not going to talk too much about this book because I did do a vlog as I was reading this book, which I will link above. I did give this book a 4 out of 5. I really enjoy being back in the Grishaverse world. And in this book, it is a multi-perspective. It's told from King Nikolai's point of view, Nina's point of view, and Zoya's point of view. And in here, Nina is in Ferda, and she's undercover in Ferda. And that's about her journey. And in here we discover that King Nikolai still has the darkness inside of him. They're trying to figure out how to get the darkness out of Nikolai in this book, as well as keep Ravka from being taken over. Like, people are still trying to start wars with Ravka, and they're keeping it a secret, of course, that Nikolai has this darkness inside of him. And Zoya, who's now the head of the army, is also trying to help with that. Yeah, I really enjoyed this story. Many people said there was a disconnect between the two stories with Zoya and King Nikolai, because they're happening, obviously, the same storyline, the same time period. And also during that time period, you are getting Nina's story in Ferda, but it's told totally separate because they're not in the same place. And some people didn't enjoy that, as you probably know from watching BookTube. However, in this book, I didn't mind that at all. I loved both the stories. There was a mystery with Nina that I really wanted to know what happened. It kept me excited every time we went back to see her. Anyway, and I enjoy getting to know King Nikolai and Zoya. I said I wouldn't talk much, but I did enjoy this book. I didn't have those complaints. I liked it. Now, when I initially started that vlog, as I mentioned, I thought I might read the 2 of these in one weekend. And of course, that's totally ambitious on my part. Come on. However, if that's all I did, I could read the 2 books on the weekend. However, I started doing my library. I redecorated these shelves, as you'll see in that video, because I'm doing a library. I'm doing my library over. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much. The point is, I didn't get both of these finished in that weekend. I thought I might do another vlog with this, but honestly, I had a hard time picking this up again because there was something that came to light at the end of The King of Scars that initially I just felt really tired when I discovered that, and I was not in a hurry to jump into Rule of Wolves. And then when I finally pushed myself to do so, I found myself getting very tired of the warring, because Ravka in the second one has war coming from all different directions, from the Sioux, from Ferida, and they're constantly trying to figure out how to save Ravka. And yeah, I gave this a 3.5, the second one. I am glad I read it just because I like to finish things, and it wasn't horrible. However, I had a hard time with the jumping back and forth this time. I'd finally just get into a chapter, like with Nina, for example, and while I was resistant at the beginning of the chapter, I'd finally settle into it, and just as I settled into it and I was hooked again, drawn into the story, bam, we were back into another character. So, and it's one of my complaints about that type of storytelling, and I loved the fact that it seemed like in The King of Scars, this one, it was done quite seamlessly, and in this one, I didn't find it was at all. That's kind of my complaint when you get into multi-perspectives. Oh, I'm sitting up. I can sit up. That's kind of been my complaint when they're doing multi-perspective or going back in time. If the writer does it well, I'm in. If not, like this one, I found it hard to get into. I have a question in that respect. Was it as difficult as I think, going back and forth between storylines and perspectives, or is it that I was just frankly very tired of the overall story? And that is a possibility. So I'd love to hear, if you've read the book, what your experience was with this second part of the duology. I also read A Song of Achilles, and that was a library book that had to be returned. So I did a quick filming of my thoughts of that book, which I will insert here. I finally had the opportunity to read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. She also wrote the book Circe, which I have yet to read, but now, because I read this one, which I definitely rated a 5 out of 5, I'm looking forward to reading Circe as well. This is a story about Achilles and his lover Patroclus, and it is told from Patroclus's point of view, and we really get to see a side of Achilles that has never been represented, to my knowledge, in this way before. Usually you see him as a pretty much just a killing machine, a person with no personality other than to do his job. And in this story, you really get to see that he is a kind-hearted person and a loving person, and he protects and he's loyal to the people that he loves. On the other side of that, you're still very aware of the fact that he can be too focused on one thing, narrow-minded. He's focused on his legacy above all else, which, you know, makes him make decisions that aren't always kind. So there's the flip side of that. I love the fact that the author showed somebody that was multidimensional, a character in particular that we've usually seen is only portrayed one way before. And you really get to know Achilles and love Patroclus and hope for the best. I think that's really funny. I heard someone else say this and I would totally concur. And that is that even though you know the ending, you know it, you've been reading it for years, there's still that little hope that things are going to turn out differently. And of course they don't. But yeah, I love the relationship portrayed here, like I said. And I felt like I was on a journey with this book, and it felt like you get immersed in the journey, and yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. And what else would I say about that? Be prepared to cry. I certainly cried a couple times in this book, and quite a bit in one scene. Anyway, I recommend this totally. Okay, I did return that book to the library. Now, the next book I have is actually a library book, and I read the first of this series, which is the Falling Kingdom series, and I'm looking around my library. Oh, it's right there. My goodness. I started another YA fantasy book this month, and this is Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes, and this is a series. It is in fact one of the series I said I was going to read in 2021, and like I said, I read this one and I rated this book a 4 out of 5. I really love this series. I'm currently halfway into the second book and I like it just as much. In the first book, we're introduced to 3 kingdoms, and I'm going to read these names and hopefully not butcher the pronunciations. Aranos, Limeros, and Pelagia. And you have Aranos on one end, and they are very wealthy, and the land is beautiful and gorgeous and produces lots of food, lots of animal life, lots of fruits and vegetables. And then we have in the middle, it's Pelagia. And in Pelagia, they're having a hard time, a difficult time, because everything is turning gray. And the only thing that's really growing there at this point are the grapes that somebody convinced them to grow to make wine to be sold to the Aranos. So now they're dependent on that other kingdom to set the price. And of course, now they've dropped the price. And the people in Pelagia have no choice but to accept that pricing, because they have nothing else to sell, and basically they're starving, having a very difficult time. And they do have a chief that supposedly has some magic left that everybody respects, but truthfully he's a chieftain that is living in a compound that, you know, of course is collecting really high taxes, and he's living really well while the rest of the country is starving. And then moving over to Limeros, we have, it's a frozen kingdom, has a very cruel king who is very stern, and they pray a lot. The land is covered in snow, and he kills whoever's in opposition to him. No questions asked, and he's very stern. Yeah, anybody that disagrees with him basically is killed. So these are, and none of these kingdoms get along, and they have nothing to do with each other. This book opens up with 2 witches stealing a baby, and this baby has a destiny. She's going to be the first sorceress that they've seen in 1,000 years in this country. We find out later which country that baby was taken to and why. This book is multi-perspective. It's told by various people's point of view. The king of Limeros' son is Magnus, and the daughter is Lucia. So we get to meet both those children. And then we have Princess Cleo, who's from Aranos. And we also meet a young man from Pelagia who witnesses his brother getting murdered in front of him. And this is the beginning of a book that ends in all these countries warring. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Again, I did say I was going to read this in 2021, and my goal is to finish this series in June. And hopefully I can do that, and I might do a little vlog about that as well. The only reason I'm hesitating now is you'll see in some upcoming book hauls that I have quite a few books have come in that are also kind of pulling at me to read in terms of series, and they're middle grade series. But yeah, anyway, that's the goal. I read a lot of middle grade books this month, and the first set of middle grade books that I'm going to talk about, I will be brief because I did a mini vlog where I tried to find new middle grade books and series in particular that I loved. So I was reading the first book of a few different series, and the first set of books I'm going to talk about, I actually read 2 books from that series. I absolutely love this series. It's called A Royal Guide to Monster Slaying, and this is by Kelley Armstrong, and this is a fantasy series, obviously. This is the first one, and the second one is the Gryphon's Lair, and I really love them. Jumped right into the second after I finished the first, and I'm looking forward to the third one being published. In this kingdom, whoever's born first inherits the throne, and the second child that's born becomes a monster slayer. Now, Rowan and her brother really wish they could switch roles. That's impossible until a little accident ends up providing them the opportunity to do so. So in this book, Rowan ends up becoming the monster slayer, and she's tested, and she really attracts animals. So this first book, I chuckled quite a bit. See, this is called a jackal, and it's kind of like a rabbit that has really long teeth and has antlers, and treats Rowan like a mom, and it's really funny. And this is a were, which I kind of think of in my mind as like a humongous, really intelligent wolf, and a Pegasus. And she ends up meeting some kids her own age, and by the end of this, they form companion group, and you watch their relationships develop, and get to meet all these magical animals. I really love this book. Definitely check it out if you're into fantasy books and want something that just really makes you smile and is a feel-good. I should also say my daughter, who's 8 this month, she listened to this one on audio and she really loved it as well. Now, this next book is called Tuesdays at the Castle, and this is by Jessica Day George. I really like this book. My daughter did not like this book because the magic element in this book is the castle, and it comes alive, and the family that inherits the throne can be the next generation, but if the castle decides otherwise, it makes it very clear and impossible for someone to inherit the throne that they don't want. Walls appear and disappear. You know, the castle suddenly grows a whole new wing. In this book, there are 3 children that are left at home while their parents go to watch their eldest son, who's a wizard, graduate. And the kids suddenly hear that their parents are dead, as well as their older brother, and they have to fight to protect the castle and their kingdom. And Celie, in particular, the youngest child in this book, has really connected to the castle. She's drawing a map, and the castle communicates with her. And I personally love this book and plan on continuing this magical series, even without my daughter. And this other book called The Winslow Craft Detective Agency, and this is by Jordan Stratford. And the art's by Kelley Murphy. Their characters are based on Ada Lovelace and Mary Shelton, who wrote Frankenstein. And this is when they're kids, so their names were Ada Lovelace is Lady Ada Bryan, and Mary Shelley is Mary Godwin when they were younger. And this, obviously, this is not true. They never met in real life. I think there's like 10 or 20 years difference in reality in their ages. But it makes for a really great story because Ada Lovelace loves science, and Mary Godwin loves writing and all those sort of things. And they decided to form a detective agency. And while I think this story is really cute and a young child might enjoy it, probably the target age, I would say a young 8. For me personally, I love middle grade books, but some of them are definitely written for children only. And in my opinion, this is one of them. I felt the entire time I read it that it was written for a very young audience. And I didn't overly enjoy that myself. Sometimes I'm totally fine with that. But in this case, yeah, I was just way too aware of it. And I couldn't get into it, so I decided not to finish the series. And the final book I actually don't have. This is book 2 of the series, and this is from the Wings of Fire series. I read the first one because my daughter wanted me to read it because she absolutely loved it, so I did. Oh yeah, there's the cover of the first one right there. I had to return it to the library. This is a book that you're going to see in the next couple weeks in a haul. That because she loved the series so much, I saw some of them on Book Outlet and I grabbed a couple of them. The first book was not there, unfortunately, so I'll have to pick that up at another bookstore. This world is all about dragons, and there's different communities of dragons based on the type of dragon that they are. At the beginning of the story, we are introduced to dragonets. These are baby dragonets being brought up under the mountain. These dragonets are part of a prophecy that says after so many years, they're basically going to come back and they're going to stop the warring that's happened because all the dragons are killing each other from different fractions, and these dragonets are supposed to come and stop all the bloodshed in the world. So we meet those dragonets, and eventually they do escape because they can't stand being underground any longer, and that happens 2 years before the prophecy is supposed to come to fruition. And very quickly they get captured, and yeah, I won't say more than that because I don't want to spoil it. I will say that I really enjoyed it. Another middle grade that I read was Leaving Lyman by Lesa Cline-Ransome. And this is the second book in a duology. And the first book was called Finding Langston. And I loved Finding Langston. I keep forgetting to purchase it because I want it on my bookshelf. I loved it that much. Now the first one, Finding Langston, I rated 5 out of 5. This one is called Leaving Lyman, and I rated this one 4 out of 5. I didn't like it as much as the first one. What I did find interesting, I didn't know walking into this, is that this character, this child Lyman, was introduced in the first book. He was the bully that we met on the playground in the first book, that Langston had problems with Lyman, and yeah, after they moved to Chicago. So I found it really interesting to get to know the background of a bully, and you got to see how challenging his life was. So in this case, Lyman was also from down south, and he moved to Chicago with his grandmother. Now, when we first met Lyman, he was having some trouble in school. He loved school and he loved his teacher, but he had a really challenging time learning to read. But when he went home, he played guitar with his grandfather, and his grandmother fed him extremely well and was definitely from a loving home. His father, unfortunately, was in prison, and his mother had disappeared. She had moved to Chicago. But yeah, he was in a loving home. And unfortunately, his grandfather died, and his grandmother didn't have enough money to live there. So he was brought to Chicago with his grandmother because his aunt lived there. And you really see Lyman struggle. His grandmother ends up not in the best health. So first Lyman's grandfather dies, and then him and his grandmother end up having to move to Chicago where his aunt is. And then eventually his grandmother ends up getting sick and going into the hospital. So Lyman goes to live with his mother for the very first time, and his stepfather, who treats him horribly, but he does meet his two brothers. And it's there that Lyman meets the other character in the first book. And eventually his dad does come back, and he moves in with the grandmother and the son, and you watch them trying to develop a relationship. And you're really cheering for Lyman. You see in this book how much life basically has delivered him a lot of terrible blows. Yeah, so you can't help but feel for the character for sure. And I do, like I said, like that they introduced a bully, and we get to see what made him turn out the way that he did. For me, that was a 4 out of 5. The last book I'm going to mention that I read was, for middle grade, was The Wild Robot Escapes, and that is by Peter Brown, and this is the second book. Roz escapes from the farm that she's at with her son, Bright Bill the Goose, who we met in the very first book, and they are trying to get back to the island. And I'm not going to spoil the ending, but of course, I love this just as much as the first book, and so did my daughter. And that book was part of a stack that my daughter and I read for Family Reads Books in May, and you can check out that video as well. Those are all the books that we read in May. I'd love to know what you read in May, and if there was anything in particular that was your favorite, I would love to know. Please leave it in the comments below, and I will see you soon with another bookish video.